More now of our exclusive interview with Dick Cheney. In a conversation full of provocative stories, maybe none is as startling as this. His account of the dramatic moments when the government was responding to the unfolding terrorist attacks of 9/11, an account quite different from that of former President Bush. Here again is Jamie Gangel.
September 11th, 2001. In a bunker under the White House, Vice President Dick Cheney says a tough decision had to be made fast. Should the military be authorized to shoot down hijacked passenger planes? Just how that decision was made is one of several striking discrepancies we notice between Cheney's new book, In My Time, and George W. Bush's Decision Points.
He writes, I told Dick that our pilots had my authority to shoot them down. I had just made my first decision as wartime commander-in-chief. In your book, you write, it was your recommendation that he approved. His version makes it sound like he was in charge and decisive. Your version makes it sound like you were.
Well, I think there's no question but what the president was in charge on that day. My version is in my book, his version's in his book, but we agreed that we'd authorize our pilots to shoot down a hijacked aircraft that refused to divert.
But you recommended it to him.
I did recommend it. That's my recollection of it. His is somewhat different, but that's not surprising. I mean, there were the fog of war that morning, all kinds of things going on.
9/11 may be the most dramatic instance, but the question lingered. Who was in charge?
George Bush was the president. Everybody knew he was the president. He made the decisions, and any suggestion to the contrary is just simply not the case. It all boiled down to that relationship, and was he willing to listen to me? Was he willing to take my advice?
But did the president just take Cheney's advice, or did he depend on it? Cheney again gives an account very different from his old boss, this time on the eve of the Iraq War.
President Bush writes, I turned to the team gathered in the Oval Office and said, let's go. You write, the president kicked everyone else out of the Oval Office, looked at me and said, Dick, what do you think we ought to do?
That's the way I recall it. And I was giving advice. I wasn't making the decision. He was making the decision.
Do you think these revelations will embarrass President Bush?
I don't know why.
Well, he's saying, let's go. I'm the leader.
Well, he was.
But you're revealing that it didn't happen that way. He cleared out the office and said, Dick, what do you think we should do?
Right.
It's a very different picture.
Right. But then he made the decision. Wasn't my decision.
Don't you think it will embarrass him that you point out the difference?
I didn't set out to embarrass the president or not embarrass the president.
If President Bush resented stories that Cheney was in charge, he had a way out. In 2004, Cheney offered 3 different times to resign from the ticket.
And twice he ignored you, but the third time, he took a couple of weeks to think about it.
Right. I really pushed hard and said, Mr. President, you really need to sit down and think about this, and that time he did. And then he came back and he said, no, I want to leave it the way it is, Dick.
Do you think he had any buyer's regret that he had given you so much power, or that the whole relationship was more than he bargained for?
He never indicated that to me. Could he have said something like that to somebody on his personal staff? I suppose it's possible.
In fact, the book reveals in Bush's second term, the president started cutting Cheney out of meetings and critical decisions. And in 2006, Bush announced to Cheney he was firing the vice president's longtime friend, Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld.
He didn't ask your advice. He came and told you. And you wrote, he turned and was out the door fast. You make it sound like the president was scared you were going to yell at him.
No, not yell at him. He knew we'd had this discussion previously. So it was a done deal. He wasn't seeking my advice and counsel.
It wasn't the only battle Cheney lost. The vice president had become a lightning rod for criticism, the Darth Vader of the administration, and sometimes found himself all alone.
At a meeting of top advisors, you were pushing for a U.S. strike against a Syrian nuclear plant. And you write that at the end of the meeting, the president asked, "Does anyone here agree with the vice president?" Not a single hand went up around the room. He put you on the spot. I mean, it's a long way from the days when he used to clear the room and say, "What happened to your relationship?"
Well, I don't think of it so much as what happened to the relationship as George Bush's growth and experience and judgment.
And while Cheney writes that Bush was bold and courageous, listen to the difference in their reactions to news that Iraq had no weapons of mass destruction, the main justification for war.
In his book, President Bush wrote he had a, quote, sickening feeling. But you don't seem to express the same reaction or regrets.
Well, I didn't have a sickening feeling. I think we did the right thing.
Bush agrees, but he may object to this, that Cheney would go public about their relationship.
You have always said that you believe the president deserves to be able to trust the people around him.
Right.
By revealing these differences, you don't think you're betraying that trust?
No.
Because?
Well, because I think that they're legitimate policy debates, and he encouraged the discussion and the debate at the time.
But Cheney does seem to want the last word.
And you get sort of one chance to write your version of events, your history, your story, and that's what I've done here. I'm honest, I'm direct.
Even so, he would not answer this question.
You worked for 2 President Bushes.
Mm-hmm.
Who is the better president?
Oh, come on, Jamie.
But you might be surprised at what he says about some other people.
Coming up, Dick Cheney shooting from the lip about a slew of former White House colleagues.
Do you think that Condoleezza Rice was a competent Secretary of State?
When Dateline continues.